herzlich willkommen zum DUB Business Talk Nummer 119. Das ist ein ganz besonderer Tag und ein ganz besonderer Talk mit einem ganz besonderen Gast, den ich hier noch vorstellen würde. Wir werden das heute auf Englisch halten, aufgrund unseres Gasts. Und wir freuen uns sehr, dass Rodney Brooks bei uns ist. Und wir werden mit ihm sprechen über Artificial Intelligence und Robotics, what we can expect from machines in 10 to 20 years. Yeah, Mr. Brooks, welcome to our call format to a digital talk. It's an honor and a privilege to have you here. And yes, we greet you in San Francisco.
Hello, and thank you so much for inviting me to join you. I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, you're very welcome, and we're looking forward also. Yeah, how can I introduce Professor Rodney Brooks? He's been a professor at the MIT. He founded 2 companies. He's one of the most renowned experts that we have in robotics and AI, I would say, in the world. And so it's very interesting to have you here, and we have a lot of questions. And we will involve the audience. If you don't mind, if they got questions, they can put them in the chat and we will post them to you then. But if it comes to me, I got a lot of questions already in place. So yeah, please, if you don't mind, start with what you're currently working on. Are there any projects in the field we are discussing that you are currently working on? Please let us know.
Yes, I have a new company. It's called Robust AI, robust.ai is its website. And what we say we're doing is building the first cognitive engine for robots. Right now, our robots are don't have much in the way of common sense. They treat most people as simply obstacles, whereas when we interact with other people, they treat us as people. And other people understand very straightforward inferences. So we're trying to build an engine for a software engine that can be used in robots and be used in existing machinery that people are trying to make more intelligent. And so we call that a cognitive engine. We're right now about 30 people, and we're building that software out. We haven't done any demonstrations yet, haven't shown it off yet, but we will over the next couple of years.
All right, very interesting. Please let us know how the thing develops. Yeah, we will take a look at it. But you are in place in this topic for, I don't know, more than 20 years, even more probably.
I wrote my master's thesis on machine learning. I wrote over 43 years ago. So I've been professionally doing this for 45 years. So
that's double the time. So and still working as an entrepreneur on the topic. This is one of the many reasons that we have you here. So we talked about that in the beginning of our chat here. Do you think that Corona? It's always said that Corona kickstarted digitization somehow. Especially in a country like Germany. Would you agree to that? And how would you describe the influence of the Corona pandemic on the topic of robotics?
Well, first I should say that Germany had kickstarted digitalization itself with Industry 4.0 long before coronavirus. So let's be clear, Germany's role.
Okay, the funny thing is that we don't regard ourselves as the ones who really did that. It's good to see someone from another country who looks at it that way.
No, it's a German thing. So thank you. At the same time, yes, coronavirus, I think, has, the way it's changed how we're interacting even now, has surprised us all in how we were able to adapt our work patterns to not being present with each other. At the same time, I wouldn't say it's digitalization so much that's been the impact of it. Certainly, for instance, at my company, we now have people all over the world, including in Germany, who write code, download it to a robot somewhere in Silicon Valley, Google Meets and Google Hangouts to observe the robot as they test their code. And I don't think we would have imagined doing a development cycle like that a year ago. That would have seemed too cumbersome. So it's shown us that we can do a different way of working. But I think also it's going to have some impact on in digitalization, if you like, on healthcare, accelerating things. Because what we've realized is, as our hospitals have become overwhelmed, that every person that we can not have in a hospital, in a work environment, the safer it is for everyone. So I think there's going to be a real push for how we automate some aspects, the non-value add, the non-patient care aspects of hospitals. We've already had, here in San Francisco, there's the UC San Francisco Medical Center. There are robots that take the dirty linen down to the laundry area, take the dirty dishes down to the laundry area. So there's no people pushing them. I think we'll see more and more pull for robots for those menial tasks, which just keep the number of people who are not adding direct value to the patients out of the hospital. We've seen lots of stories about new robots, if you like, with ultraviolet virus killing systems. And that was certainly stronger earlier in coronavirus, before we understood that a lot of the transmission is through the air, and that doesn't help so much through the air. But that, be that as it may, we'll see lots and lots of, I think, more cases of how we can keep the hospital environments clean, how we can minimize the number of unessential caregivers in the hospitals.
How would you describe the development right now? Would it be, is it the most dynamic you've ever seen in your work life?
Certainly, it's the most dynamic in the sense of it's out there in the world. It's well known. I saw on television news last night, as we're talking about the new administration in the United States. There it was on the news how important artificial intelligence is going to be in competing with China in artificial intelligence. That sort of language has never been around for the 60 years. At the same time, in a much smaller, more private groups, there's been waves of tremendous excitement, thinking we've got it. It's going to take off right now. So, I often ask people about autonomous vehicles. I ask them, when was the first autonomous car on a public freeway that traveled more than 100 kilometers per hour and traveled for 20 kilometers? And they say, oh, maybe that was 2008, maybe it was 2010. No, it was 1987 in Bavaria with Professor Ernst Dickman's. So it's been around a lot longer than people think from the early days. It takes a lot longer to get things into deployment than people think.
All right. So as far as I know, you are also of the opinion that it will take much more than expected that artificial intelligence reaches a level of human intelligence. You just wrote that lately.
I could give you an analogy there, and I think it both talks about the current excitement and how real that is, and the longer term when we talk about human level intelligence. I like the analogy that we heavier than air flight. In the first 50 or so years of artificial intelligence, we were dealing with hot air balloons and gliders and kites. Recently, in the last 10 years, we invented the first airplanes that actually flew. And if we look at that analogy, those airplanes changed the 20th century over a period of 100 years, completely changed everything in the 20th century. And AI will be like that. But human level intelligence, it's up there on the moon. And those airplanes are never going to get there. We're going to have some other sorts of inventions that we haven't thought of yet. We're around 1910 in aircraft years.
All right. So this leads us to the point. And so there are very famous men or women living, who share a certain fear of artificial intelligence. There's probably Elon Musk, one of the most prominent, and he is of the opinion that it's one of the biggest threats for mankind. You're of a different opinion. Please tell us why.
Yeah. By the way, I you know, Elon is a tremendous entrepreneur. It doesn't mean he's always right about everything. As we've seen, his pronouncements about how soon he would have autonomous driving have been wrong every time. Early in 2019, he said that by the end of 2020, there would be 1 million Tesla taxis autonomous on the roads. I think the answer is going to be 0, not 1 million. It's a little off there. He's a fantastic entrepreneur. But you know, on the one hand, he's saying AI is going to be, he's scared of it. On the other hand, I think he's doing a disservice by promoting how far along his autonomous driving is in his cars and having it testing out amongst the rest of us driving around without our approval of what he's putting there. You know, he's jumping past what I think would be prudent regulation. So it's two-sided. And at the same time, you know, while we have had incredible changes through deep learning in the last 10 years, and many of us use deep learning systems every day. When we talk with the voice, when we talk to our phones, when we talk to the assistants in our homes, be they Google at home or they be the Amazon Alexa or other systems, that was not possible 10 years ago. Deep learning has allowed that, for instance. So there has been a lot of change, but it's an Andrew Ng, who was, he is a professor at Stanford. He was chief scientist at Baidu. He has started autonomous driving companies. He points out, I think rightly, that all the big advances in the last 10 years have been in the things that humans do without thought in a second or so. You know, there's a person, there's a car, recognizing things or listening to words. It's not the same sort of deliberative planning or understanding of the world that you would need to have an AI system that you should be scared of because of its intelligence. We should be scared of AI systems that are deployed without pre-thought, such as systems which, you know, there's a famous story about Amazon was trying out a system to pre-screen resumes for hiring people, and it adopted all the prejudices of its data set and was not wanting to hire any women because historically that's what the hirers had been doing, and so that's what the AI system learned. So there's danger from that. There's danger from deployment of things that aren't as smart as we think.
Mm-hmm. But if you compare then, it's Elon Musk, which is an entrepreneur, looks from a certain point of view on that topic. There are scientists maybe look from another point of view.
I claim I cover both.
Yeah, that's the reason why I asked you that question, the following question. Does an entrepreneur on that field need some, I don't know, some scientist in himself to get into that topic, or is it more or less a tool that you can use? How much do you have to be into it to make something out of it entrepreneurial?
There are certain things you can do with the tools, and the tools are getting better. Facebook, Google, etc., are making public their tools. And that you can do certain things with it and build real systems, but you have to be very careful about the traps that you may not understand because you don't understand how the tools work deeply enough. And we will see many failures in that regard. We've seen in many countries over the last year a pushback against facial recognition. Facial recognition has gotten much better, but then it's being deployed in systems, from a technologist point of view, this is great, but from a social point of view, it hasn't been so great. So care.
Of course. But we are all told every day that technology accelerates. It's like it has a pace that it hasn't had before. And, the Moore's law and stuff like that, try to prove it. And so would you think that the fast developing technology would really push the dynamics of artificial intelligence more than you maybe yourself expect?
Well, of course, I don't think I'm wrong, but let me address that. I think we have been trained. We, the modern technological people, have been trained for over 50 years by Moore's law. Moore's law operated for 50 years with a continuous doubling that went on and on. No other technology has had such a run of that many doublings, about 25 doublings in Moore's law. Most technologies don't last that long. Moore's law was special because it was using the information abstraction. Is there a voltage there or is there not a voltage there? And it's like, is there a pile of sand in front of me or not? If you take away half the sand in a pile of sand, it's still a pile of sand. And then you take another half, it's still a pile of sand. And you can do that until you get down to 1 grain. We've reached the 1 grain level, and you can't take away half the pile of sand and still have a pile of sand. Okay. But it's trained us to think that all technology just goes on and on and on, and is in, just happens. And, my analogy that, artificial intelligence is the moon. Yes, we did go to send people to the moon in the late 1960s and early 1970s. We haven't since. It didn't just automatically go on and on. And we need to understand that about all science and all technologies. It comes in fits and starts. We had a very big fit from, a very big chunk from Moore's law, but that doesn't mean all technology goes on so long. Over a century ago, quantum mechanics came about. For 20 years, we've been talking about quantum computers. We still don't have a practical quantum computer. We still don't really understand quantum mechanics. It's been over a century old. So not everything just happens exponentially.
That's interesting. There are a lot of evangelists out there who just, telling us the other side of the story is like that it's running.
The other side is exciting.
Yeah, that's a good story. It's good storytelling. Yeah, exactly. Now, a few steps back, maybe when you are talking about artificial intelligence, for you, of course, it's also and always combined with robotics, which is your special field. When you ask people on the street, they will probably, by artificial intelligence, they will maybe have an image of an robot in their minds, but if it comes to practical work, it's more or less like it got nothing to do with a humanoid or with a robot, but it's like voice recognition or stuff like that. So what do you think? Do both things need to get together, like robotics and artificial intelligence, or are just separate developments that have to be regarded as separate developments?
Oh, well, I should say that my field has always been intelligent robots.
Mm-hmm.
There are intelligent robots.
That's a combination of both.
There is a lot of mechanical engineering, a lot of material science, a lot of sensors, a lot of electronics goes into robots. But I've always been much more interested well, I've been interested in all those things, but I've been interested in how you make them operate intelligently in the world. But it's a long, hard process. What is my, I like to, one of my companies was iRobot, which made the Roomba vacuum cleaner. There are now many competitors. iRobot is still a very, well-functioning company. I don't know the numbers. I think it's sold over 30 million Roombas worldwide. Other companies are doing many. So I sort of make the joke that I started out my life as a pure mathematician and ended up as a vacuum cleaner salesman. Just a little disappointing. What I could make practical that really got adopted in the world is very simple, with very low level of intelligence. And that's part of the, I think the underestimation by many people that, they see something like an assistant that can understand the words and transcribe the words we say out loud into text, and then generalize that, oh, it must understand a lot about the world, and it doesn't understand a lot about the world. There's just a lot of engineering to make it practical, and it takes a long time.
Yeah, I think it was in the 1980s when you started building robots. I hope I'm right. And your role model back in those days were insects.
Yes.
Yes. When you look at it from today, what kind of animal would it be then?
I don't think we're close to a mouse yet.
Okay.
Ways to go.
Yeah, ways to go. Okay. So why do you choose an insect then? Just explain to the audience why was it?
Well, it really I was trying to build intelligent robots, and for a family reason, I was on a vacation at where my in-laws lived, and no one spoke English, and my wife was busy speaking to her in-laws. So I got to sit by myself for days and days thinking, and it was in a house on stilts on a river with lots of insects around, and I was watching the insects, and I thought, I don't know how to build a robot as smart as these insects I'm looking at. Maybe that's where I should start, aim for insect level, because they're really smart when you look at them in detail.
Okay, yeah, they are, of course, but yeah, okay, leaving that topic again. And you said an interesting thing at the beginning of our conversation. You said you talked about autonomous driving. Which is, of course, a main topic here in Germany because of a car addiction that we have here in the country.
And I always have German cars myself. Okay. I'm actually getting one built in Germany this week. So okay. Thank you.
No, we are all starting buying Teslas then. Yeah, because of the plant he's building here. Now, yeah, but if it comes to that, that fits very good to what you described before. There's a lot of talk about autonomous driving, and there are a lot of tests everywhere going around in Germany and in California, and people do expect, oh, does it happen like next year or the year after or the year after? But then it will. What's your point of view? How far are we? And yeah, what do you expect?
Yeah, so I have a slide for many of my talks where I took a snapshot in 2017 of what all the executives of the major companies were saying about when they were going to be delivering autonomous driving. And over half their predictions are already out the door, and many others have been retracted, such as Daimler has changed their tune on autonomous driving. And I think we should remember what happened when we first introduced automobiles into our society 100 years ago. We had to transform our cities to make them work. And we shouldn't expect that we can just put this very new technology into our current situation without making some changes in infrastructure. And so we will have, and we're starting to see some experiments with autonomous vehicles in isolated geographical areas, such as Chandler, Arizona, or in corporate campuses where the vehicles go slowly enough and there's so little traffic, and all the other traffic which is driven by humans is by employees of that corporation, so being trained. But the autonomous vehicles always have the option of stopping cold if they don't understand what's going on. You cannot do that in the middle of a freeway. You don't have that option. You have to keep going. And so I think it's going to be a lot longer for freeway driving than people think. Even though, as I pointed out, it was first done in 1987. it's going to be a while, and I think we're likely to see dedicated lanes for the autonomous vehicles being able to communicate with each other, and it will be a different level of system. It won't be a one-for-one replacement of an autonomous vehicle just plopped into the middle of humans driving around.
Of course. There's another thought to that, which is, I think it was now, it's a couple of, is it already years ago, but at least 1 year, when the last time it hit the media that an autonomous driving car killed someone because of a software bug. On the other hand, we all know how many deaths are related to human driving. How do you think, or why do you think are those things measured differently?
So you see that in a lot of the proponents of autonomous driving in the US, the national deaths from human driving are about 35,000 per year. And so entrepreneurs say, well, if we come out with a system where there's only 25,000 deaths, that's going to be much more acceptable. And I think that just doesn't fit with the irrationality of us humans. I think the answer is not 35,000 or 25,000 deaths would be acceptable. I think 10 deaths per year would be pushing it, even though today we have 35,000 deaths a year in the United States from human driving.
Yeah.
It's not just a one-for-one replacement. People think about it differently.
All right. So there's been a lot of talk these days about the race on technologies like artificial intelligence. It's of course a race between the United States and China as maybe the biggest opponent or the leader in that race, the current, and there's also Europe, which is regarded third place or somewhere in the pack at least. So what's your opinion on that? What's the role of Europe in that race?
Yeah, I have a slightly different view.
All right.
In terms of geopolitics, you know, we talk about the United States, China, and Russia. Russia is not big enough, does not have the budgets to really push artificial intelligence. I see it as Europe, United States, Japan, you know, I'm from Australia, so I'll include Australia in that. I see that grouping working well together, and China being somewhat, we can't quite, not as transparent. So I see those two groupings, and I don't downplay the role of Europe in AI by any means. It's part of that structure together. Mm-hmm. So I see those two axes, and those two axes may, because of artificial intelligence, become more dominant in geopolitics in the use of AI. And so there's, you know, it's really hard to see ahead in the world for 10 years, let alone 50 years. But I think 50 years from now, the AI and those technologies will have grouped those axes in that way.
All right. So let's involve the audience. Please post your questions in the chat or raise your hand, which you can do via the participant sign at the down there, and you can see it, and then raise your hand. Hopefully, I see it, or just ask some questions in the chat. So yeah, there's already someone who's saying thank you. Fantastic. All right.
Perhaps one question, if I may just jump in.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Thomas. I think we all speak a lot about autonomous driving, although there might be many different ways of utilizing AI. Why is it we always speak about autonomous driving? I mean, all the public discussion, is it just perhaps just an assumption that it's the easiest, picture one can have of AI, or are there other reasons for that? What's your guess, Mr. Brooks?
Well, I think two things. One was the fact that AI could drive vehicles at all was a big surprise to people. Yeah. So that captured their imaginations, but they didn't see the long tail of problems. And I point to autonomous trains. We don't have many autonomous trains in the world, even though we've had them around many decades. There are some subway systems in the world. I certainly know in Toronto, in France, there are autonomous lines. There are probably a few in Germany that I don't know about. But, in the United States, we only have 15 autonomous rail systems, and most of those are in airports. That's not much autonomous rail, and autonomous rail is much easier than autonomous driving on cars. It's just harder than people think. And the fact that it could be done at all was so surprising that I think it captured people's imaginations.
Okay, thank you.
All right, there's another question just coming in via the chat. It's from Miriam Runau. What sorts of new robots can we expect to be commercially successful over the next 10 to 20 years?
Yes, I think every entrepreneur wants to know the answer to that question. For years, people have been asking me, okay, you have robot vacuum cleaners in homes, what's next? I've said, if I knew, I'd be doing it. I think that, but I do look at trends in the world, what I call mega trends, other people call mega trends, that will make a pull. And one of the mega trends is the aging of society, the demographic inversion. Many more older people, many less younger people ratio for support. And so I think there'll be a pull for any sort of systems which let elderly, and I'm getting that way myself, stay in their own homes independently longer, which give them dignity and independence. So, for example, one of the reasons people have to go into managed care is when they can no longer get into and out of bed themselves. So a robotic device that could help the elderly get into and out of beds, help them bathe safely without falling. Sorry about that. I wanted that prop here, but I switched it off. I think anything like that is there's going to be more pull for, and if robotics and AI people can deliver something that's cost effective, I think that will become successful. On the other hand, we have this incredible demand for construction as we have urbanization around the world, and many of our cities which are near the water are going to have to be moved somewhat because of climate change. So urbanization, climate change, putting a tremendous pull on construction. And lots of construction is still using technologies developed by the Romans. And the digitalization of that and the robotification of construction, I think, will be another pull. And there are likely to be some new sorts of systems there that are successful.
Okay. All entrepreneurs in the audience here listen closely now. Coming back to that first point that you made, the healthcare or care for the elderly. What do you think what a robot in this case should be like? Is it really an aim to imitate human emotions, maybe in the care, or is it just that what you told us in the beginning, that, I don't know, cleaning the linen or whatever? Or is it also about, like what Alexa is already for some people, maybe, some sort of a partner to talk to?
Yeah. This is a difficult question. The Roomba, the home vacuum cleaner, so many people give names to their Roombas and dress them up, which to me is sort of crazy. They're not very smart little robots. Why are you treating them that way? At the same time, some people have talked about robots as being companions for the elderly. Certainly, there's been many experiments in Japan in that way. I don't think all cultures feel the same about robots in their lives. I think that's going to be very variable across countries, across places. My own feeling is that robots are unlikely. I don't like the idea. Let me put it that way. I don't like the idea of robots replacing humans in the emotions of other humans. I'm all for relieving the stress on the caregivers so they can spend more human time and doing the jobs which are not of direct patient value. So that's how I see things going. At the same time, there's been a lot of talk, and you haven't mentioned it yet. There's been a lot of talk about the trolley problem and whether cars have to make moral decisions.
Yeah.
I like to think about the following as an example for an elder care robot. Even that robot that helps me, old me, get into and out of bed. It's likely to have a speech interface because I'm likely to want to say, no, it's hurting over there. Don't let me here.
Yeah.
I want to talk to it. It will have to be aware of me. It'll have to be looking at me. And now, what if 20 years from now, my robot that's helping me into and out of bed notices that I have soiled my pajamas? Well, that's not good. And I say to it, don't tell my children. Okay, now I have set up a moral problem. I don't think in 20 years our robots are going to be able to reason through that. I think that we're going to have contracts and regulations that we all agree to beforehand. Mm-hmm. The moral philosophers will have to think about it. The lawyers will have to agree, the lawmakers. But it's going to open up a whole new set of privacy issues that we haven't had to face right now.
All right. Yeah, very interesting and very good image, just gotta admit. Yeah. So what do you think of Sophia by Hansen Robotics, which is, went through the media and we actually...
I have a hard time speaking politely around that. It's a sham. It's a total sham, and the media gets pulled in again and again. It is... I don't want to say the words. It makes my blood boil.
All right. I think we understand you without further words on that point of view. But on the other hand, at least it's what I said in the beginning. It's like an attempt to get closer to the thing that a robot should look like a human and should act like a human. Maybe you should build up a relationship.
Okay. So here's the thing. Every robot makes a promise from its visual appearance. And if that promise is not kept, then the users are going to be disappointed. And speaking of Hansen had a robot that looked like Albert Einstein. So I always say, if you build a robot to look like Albert Einstein, it better be as smart as Albert Einstein, or people are going to be disappointed. And that's what we see. It's polluting the waters with disappointment. Mm-hmm. A Roomba is a disk. It doesn't look like it's going to talk about intelligent things, and it delivers on its promise. So we have to all roboticists have to understand how you make the robot look is promising something. You better deliver on that promise.
Mm-hmm. All right. A very good point, I think. So who do you think should foster the development of robotics and AI? Should it only be due to the entrepreneurial side, or is it also that governments or society itself should be involved? The politicians, who should play what role in that sense? Maybe some people who talk about ethics in that development.
Yeah, so I see three components, and this is true of most technologies. There's the academic research, there's the entrepreneurs deploying, and there is the social and government making sure that it's deployed safely in a way which is not harmful to society. All three of those groups at times fail. And that's just how our lives as humans has been for hundreds of years. That's not going to change all of a sudden just because it's AI. It's been that way on many, many sorts of technologies.
Yeah.
So, I worry, as a former academic, I worry about a push from politicians, if you like, to make academia be more of job training rather than have a deep thought component.
All right.
That is where we can have the deep thought without the pressures of having to deliver a product and a profit every 3 months. Yes, we need a lot of job training, but maybe we have to, keep separate. And I think Germany, of most countries, has done this more successfully, of having universities and having job training for non-university sorts of jobs.
Yeah, very common here. And actually,
it's a very good model. But we shouldn't forget the universities, because that's where the new ideas are going to come from. And if we rely on entrepreneurs, the early entrepreneurs, early in starting companies, won't be able to really develop new ideas because they've got to get a product out. And then when the company, and we see this, I think with the large companies, which we all know, Google, Facebook, etc., when they become very large, they protect the intellectual development inside, and it's not open to the world. So I think we've got some rebalancing to do there, and Europe is sort of leading the way in that, in some ways. But we also need to have groups and small institutes which have some intellectual freedom to investigate hard problems, which may take a long time. At the same time, we also want the general public to be a little more educated, so they don't get taken in by the shams that people propose. I've seen some friends have complained to me, friends in Europe have complained to me, that their proposals for research were rejected and it was citing exactly that sham you talked about before. It's already successful. You don't need to do this research. No, it's a show. So we also do need politicians, general public, to understand what is real and what is not real better.
Fun fact on that, it's like in Germany, they're always complaining about that the scientists are too much separated from the entrepreneurs. There's a gap between both. It's like you said, okay, they shouldn't work maybe so close together that the scientists have to deliver every 3 months. But here the gap is too big. Maybe at least a lot of people are complaining about that.
No, these are all dynamic systems. They all involve people. And when you involve people with things always get messy. And there's tension going back and forth. So it will be a dynamic, tension-filled enterprise.
That's why we should employ AI also. That's a good reason. Maybe, are there any other comments out of the audience? If not, I would like to take a look together with you in the future, of course, unfortunately at the end of our a very interesting and inspiring conversation here. But let's take a look at the future. You're working yourself, as you told us in the beginning, on a new project. We already asked you about the prospects of technology within the 10 to 20 years. But and we heard that you are expecting the development not as fast as others do. So all in all, what would be your prospect to I would say, if you can judge this time, to the next 5 years, what kind of development do we see? I think AI is more and more into a private and job lives integrated, and so we will get accustomed more and more to that. And to what does this lead us to?
Okay, so let me just clarify my pessimism, if you like. I'm not pessimistic that I'm optimistic that current AI systems will have tremendous economic and social impact. We have to be careful about the social impact, what we want. But that's different from having human level intelligence. I think that's way off. But we are not exploiting fully by any means the level of the systems we currently have. What that will mean in the 5-year time frame is much more assistance to humans. We've seen that in our automobiles. The driver assist features have gotten much better, and that will continue to be the case. Driver assist will have new features, new capabilities. We will become better and safer drivers as a result of that. It will likewise have more impact and this is another coronavirus fallout. Many parts of the world, we have become more reliant on e-commerce and delivery of goods to our homes. We're not going out into the stores.
Yeah.
I think that will continue. We've had AI and robotics in fulfillment centers doing certain tasks, but the picking up an object up until now is still being done by humans. That is starting to change this year. In the last year, there's been a lot of companies, a lot of experiments, and the picking part is going to become more automated because we just can't get enough workers in those systems. Up until now, academic research on packing has not been very successful, but we're starting to see movement there. So both the picking will come earlier, the packing out in the 5-year time frame. Then the big question is the last 100 meters of delivery, how that can be automated so there have to be less people. That is still an open question. That's longer out than 5 years. But I think goods fulfillment is going to be a big driver for Europe, United States, Japan, and China for the next 20 years.
Mm-hmm. There's another, thank you very much for that view. Another question just came in. It's from Miriam. All right, she's talking about voice assistants that have a female voice, and she says, you yourself have built robot dolls that can cry. So do we need to diminish the boundaries between that humanoid robot and...
Yeah. Yes, thank you for remembering my real baby from 1999, I think it was. It was a toy.
Right.
It was a toy. I think I've evolved in my position since then. At the time, I always said that, and I've always said that robots should have no gender, because if they have a gender, they're making a promise, and that they can't deliver on that promise. So robots should not have a gender. And female voice, I think, has been and the assistance has been a symptom of our view of the role of men and women in society, and I think we are getting beyond that. So there's some things that need to change there, and should change. Recently there's been some philosophers talking about how many of our robots have an implicit race, and certain people either consciously or unconsciously project their views of race into their robots. So we have to be careful about all these things, because it can drive ways of thinking which I think are not appropriate. So I prefer to see boundaries.
All right.
Myself. I prefer boundaries. And until we have human level intelligence, I don't think we need to revisit that, to be honest. And that's hundreds of years off, in my view.
Okay. Professor Rodney Brooks, thank you so much for sharing all your inspiring ideas and views with us. I think we learned a lot about realistic optimism and about promises that have to be kept. And and you're not only a scientist and entrepreneur, but also some sort of an entertainer. So thanks a lot. I enjoyed the talk very much. Now I change into German to say goodbye to your viewers. Also vielen Dank auch für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit da draußen an den Schirmen. Also ich glaube, es hätte kaum interessanter sein können. Sie können alles nachlesen auf dub-magazin.de und im DUB Unternehmermagazin. Und morgen wird es noch einen Call geben. Da schalten Sie bitte um 16 Uhr wieder ein zur gewohnten Zeit. Ich freue mich auf Sie und ich sage thank you, goodbye.
Thank you.
And see you.